In the heart of a brutal Minnesota winter, where the wind howled like a wounded beast and snowflakes assaulted the world in relentless fury, Ella Thompson stood at her frost-laced window, watching the storm swallow her quiet suburban street. The flakes swirled in chaotic patterns, blanketing cars and rooftops in a thick, unforgiving layer that seemed to erase the boundaries between homes and the endless white void beyond. At 28, Ella was no stranger to isolation. Widowed young after her husband's sudden accident 3 years ago, she scraped by as a part-time librarian in the small town of Eden Prairie. Her days were filled with the quiet rustle of borrowed stories, shelving books that transported others to far-off worlds, while she remained anchored in her own muted reality. Nights were worse. Echoes of laughter that once filled her home, the ghost of Mark's touch, the weight of medical bills that still loomed like shadows in her mailbox. But on this night, as the power flickered ominously and the temperature plummeted to sub-zero depths that made the air itself brittle, a faint knock shattered the silence. It was barely audible over the gale, but it pierced through, insistent and desperate. Ella froze, her heart pounding in rhythm with the storm. Who could be out there? The neighborhood had hunkered down hours ago, warnings blaring from the radio about whiteout conditions and life-threatening cold. She padded to the door in her wool socks, the floorboards creaking underfoot, and peered through the peephole. There, huddled on her porch like a fragile sculpture of ice, was a frail figure, an elderly woman, her coat dusted white, trembling like a leaf in the gale. Snow clung to her scarf and eyelashes, and her gloved hands clutched a small purse as if it were her last lifeline. Without a second thought, Ella flung open the door, a blast of Arctic air rushing in like an unwelcome intruder. "Come in, quick," she urged, pulling the stranger inside before the storm could claim her. The door slammed shut behind them, sealing out the chaos, and for a moment, the only sound was the woman's ragged breathing. The woman, who introduced herself as Margaret Hale in a voice quivering from the cold, was in her 80s, her face etched with lines of a life well lived but now worn thin by hardship. Her skin was pale, almost translucent under the hallway light, and her eyes, a faded blue that hinted at once vibrant skies, held a quiet desperation mixed with gratitude. As Ella helped her out of her sodden coat, Margaret explained in halting words that her car had skidded off the road a block away, the tires losing grip on a hidden patch of black ice. Stranded in the blizzard with no family nearby, no phone signal cutting through the interference of the storm, and the nearest shelter miles off in downtown Minneapolis, she'd wandered blindly until she spotted Ella's porch light flickering like a beacon in the whiteout. I didn't know where else to go," Margaret admitted, her teeth chattering as Ella guided her to the living room. "You're safe now," Ella said softly, her own voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through her. She wrapped Margaret in a thick wool blanket from the couch, the one Mark had bought on their honeymoon in Colorado, and led her to the fireplace. With numb fingers, Ella struck a match, coaxing the flames to life from the logs she'd stacked earlier that day. The fire crackled and popped, casting a warm golden glow that pushed back the chill seeping through the walls. Ella busied herself in the kitchen, brewing a pot of chamomile tea with honey, the steam rising like a promise of comfort. She shared her modest supper, a hearty vegetable soup simmering on the stove paired with crusty bread from the local bakery. They sat at the small wooden table, the storm raging outside like a furious symphony, while inside, a tentative warmth bloomed. As the evening unfolded, they talked, really talked, in a way Ella hadn't with anyone since Mark's passing. Margaret recounted tales of her youth in post-war America, growing up in a cramped Chicago apartment during the 1950s, where rationing was a fresh memory and optimism was the currency of the day. She spoke of marrying her high school sweetheart, Robert, a factory worker with dreams bigger than their paycheck, and raising 3 children on a shoestring budget. "We didn't have much," Margaret said, her hands cradling the mug for warmth. "But we had each other. Picnics in the park with sandwiches made from leftovers. Dancing to the radio on Saturday nights. Those were the good times." Her voice grew somber as she described losing Robert to a prolonged battle with cancer just last year, the hospital rooms that smelled of antiseptic and finality, the emptiness that followed. Ella listened intently, her own grief softening in the shared vulnerability. She opened up too, hesitantly at first, about Mark's car crash on an icy road much like this one. The way the world had tilted off its axis in an instant, leaving her to navigate debts and loneliness. "I used to dream of more," Ella confessed, staring into the fire. A family, a home full of life. Now it's just surviving. It was a simple act of kindness born from the empathy of someone who knew loneliness all too well. But in that exchange, something shifted. The storm outside seemed less menacing, the night less empty. As the night deepened, the blizzard intensified, winds whipping snow against the windows in angry bursts, blanketing the world in an unforgiving hush that muffled even the distant hum of plows. The power flickered again, then held, but Ella knew better than to trust it. She offered Margaret her spare bedroom, the one she'd kept untouched since Mark's death, insisting she stay until morning when help could arrive. "It's no trouble," Ella said, fluffing the pillows and turning down the quilt. Margaret protested weakly, but exhaustion won out and she sank into the bed with a sigh of relief. Lying awake in her own room, Ella reflected on her life, how she'd withdrawn after Mark's death, building walls around her heart to protect against further pain. Friends had drifted away. Invitations declined until they stopped coming. Her job at the library was a refuge, surrounded by stories of heroes and happy endings. But her own narrative felt stalled in tragedy. Inviting this stranger in felt reckless, a crack in her armor, yet profoundly right. What if Margaret hadn't knocked? What if Ella had ignored it, too scared to open the door? The thought chilled her more than the cold. Little did she know, this impulsive compassion would unravel secrets and weave destinies in ways she could never imagine, like threads in a tapestry she hadn't yet seen. The next morning dawned crisp and clear, the sun glinting off fresh snow like diamonds scattered across the lawn, transforming the brutal landscape into a sparkling wonderland. The storm had passed, leaving behind a serene silence broken only by the occasional drip of melting icicles. Ella woke to the aroma of coffee brewing, a rich, nutty scent that pulled her from sleep like a gentle hand. In the kitchen, Margaret, surprisingly spry despite the ordeal, had risen early to repay the hospitality. She moved with purpose, her white hair neatly pinned, humming an old tune as she set out mugs and toast. "Good morning, dear," Margaret greeted, her voice steady and warm. "I hope you don't mind, I found the coffee grounds. It's the least I can do after you saved me from freezing out there." Ella smiled, rubbing sleep from her eyes, touched by the gesture. Over breakfast, eggs scrambled with herbs from Ella's windowsill garden, fresh fruit, and the steaming coffee, they chatted easily, the previous night's vulnerability giving way to lighter topics. Margaret shared funny anecdotes about her grandchildren, one a budding artist in New York, another a teacher in California. Ella laughed for the first time in what felt like months, the sound foreign yet welcome in her home. But as they cleared the dishes, stacking plates in the sink with companionable efficiency, Margaret's demeanor shifted. Her eyes sparkled with a newfound energy, as if the night had rekindled a dormant fire within her. "You've given me more than shelter, dear," she said, placing a hand on Ella's arm. "In my darkest hour, you reminded me of the goodness still left in this world. I was ready to give up, on everything." Ella brushed it off with a humble smile, murmuring something about it being what anyone would do. But deep down, she felt a warmth spreading through her chest. The conversation was interrupted by the crunch of tires on snow outside. Peering through the window, they saw a sleek black SUV pulling up, its polished exterior contrasting sharply with the rustic neighborhood. A man in a tailored coat stepped out, his boots sinking into the drifts as he approached the door with purposeful strides. He was tall, with salt and pepper hair and an air of quiet authority, yet his eyes held a kindness that softened his commanding presence. He introduced himself as Alexander Voss, a tech billionaire whose name Ella vaguely recognized from headlines about innovative startups, revolutionizing renewable energy, and philanthropic ventures that funded education in underserved communities. Alexander's story unfolded like a plot from one of Ella's library books, rich with drama and redemption. Margaret, it turned out, was his long-estranged grandmother. Years ago, a family rift had driven them apart. Alexander's relentless pursuit of success in Silicon Valley had come at the cost of personal relationships, late nights in boardrooms replacing family dinners, ambition eclipsing affection. Margaret, proud and independent, had refused his attempts at reconciliation, seeing his